joining our Drive to Thrive webinar series. Carrie and I have created this free webinar series as a way to connect with business owners and entrepreneurs and connect them with a variety of thought leaders and experts who are sharing their strategies for business success amidst this time of uncertainty.
We wanted to provide encouragement and practical tools that business owners and entrepreneurs can put into practice right now. With the right mindset, we really feel like we can focus through our fears to develop strategies that we can use to both thrive in the now and also in the new normal, whatever that looks like. Hi, my name is Carrie Sawyer. I am the founder of Diversity by Design. We help leaders to cultivate inclusive environments where teams can do their best work.
And my name is Kyle Moss, a self-proclaimed purveyor of joy, and also the founder of Experts Together, a global life coaching and consulting practice offering expert advice to you and your organization to help you become a little bit more clear on who you are, ultimately also adding just a little bit more joy to each of your days.
Today we'll be talking all about staying social at a distance during a pandemic.
So we all know we are social creatures, and with this pandemic, that has really been turned on its head. Today, we're going to be exploring with some amazing guests what we can do to bring back that sense of social connection and that sense of normalcy.
Yes, I love that. And obviously, as you can tell in the way that Carrie and I interact, we are we're all in need of this connection, and we get it however we can these days. But we're so excited to have with us today two amazing guests. So I'm excited to introduce them. They're both dear to my heart. First up, we've got Rachel Christensen. She is the Assistant Director at the Brink at USD. It's a small business development center. And we also have Nate Acorn, who is the campus pastor at the church at Rancho Bernardo. And I also think, I don't want to murder this title, Nate, but are you also co-founder of North County Unite Inland? I should have asked you this before. Is that the correct title?
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Awesome. And third note is that Nate and I also are co-founders together of a nonprofit here called Alabaster Jar Project, which we would always talk about, or we could always talk about later, but we do that together as well. So thank you both for jumping on.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we're going to take a minute or two for both of you just to say a minute about yourselves. So ladies first. Rachel, do you want to step up to the plate?
So my name is Rachel Christensen. It's a joy to be with you all today. I am now 10 years here in San Diego and very much identify as somebody who loves the neighborhoods of San Diego. So most of my time has been spent getting to know different neighborhoods and neighbors, and that's from volunteering to working in various sort of community-based efforts, as well as walking. I think one of the main things that I love to do is to walk and meet new people. And then that extends also to the binational region. Another part of my identity is being somebody by choice who's a borderlander, and so have lived on both sides, San Diego, Tijuana, spend a lot of my time, and that's certainly something that's a challenge right now. But it's something that is it's a piece of my identity that I'm very committed to. So knowing people and loving people on both sides of the border. Vocationally, I've been involved in micro-entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, and now work for a small business development center that's focused on innovation, growth-oriented companies that's hosted at University of San Diego. So most of the work I do is sort of at the nexus of small business development and higher education. So we might dig into that a little bit later, but knowing that this is a very, very challenging time for entrepreneurs and for small businesses, and I'm on the phone with probably dozens of entrepreneurs per day, and know the fear is real. So hoping today that we can talk a little bit about some of the ways that we can shift our mindset and offer a lot of grace for ourselves and reinvite that creativity into our lives.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Thank you so much again for joining us, Rachel. Nate, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself than I already did?
Yeah, not much there. I am married, so I got wife and 2 young daughters right now. So that's kind of a huge part of my world, trying to figure out how do you navigate, relationship, work, family, trying to figure that new reality out. And then work-wise, full-time, a pastor in North County, San Diego at a church. And then part of my work there has been working in the nonprofit world. So just kind of as we stepped in as a church into some of the areas of difficulty in our community, realizing some of the things we needed to do, and that turned into these nonprofit organizations, one being Alabaster Jar Project, working with women who are coming out of a life of sexual exploitation, and just trying to figure out how to help them put their lives back together. So we've been doing that work now for about 7 years and seeing some incredible results with the women. So it's been very cool to be a part of that. And then most recently, about 2 years ago, with Unite NCI. So trying to bring together business, nonprofit, and city to work together to solve some of the challenges in our North County inland region. So some of the work I've been up to.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys again both for giving your time and your expertise. We do definitely look at you both, like I said, like uber connectors with a lot to offer our audience. So we're super pumped to hear a little bit more about what you have to say during this time. All right, Carrie.
Great. So thank you. This is going to be a really great conversation. So we're going to jump into our topic today, which is all about staying socially connected during a pandemic. And I've already thrown in a curveball because I added a question to the beginning of what I sent you. So, but I'm really excited to hear your insights on this. Right now, many of us are taking it day by day. Like some days feel like pretty good or okay, and then other days are just like the pits. So can you just talk to us a little bit about, like, socially, why is this so hard? And who wants to go first?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably a personal answer and maybe it's a collective answer, but rhythms. So there are rhythms that are interrupted. And we certainly are people that often, even if we don't like habit, I don't really like habit. I actually don't have generally like a way that my day flows. But now when there's more questions and more open-ended, I'm realizing that I did have some kind of routines, even though I don't identify as a super routine person, that in the absence of them, it's disorienting. I think that the other piece is that certainly for me, a lot of my social interaction that gave me a lot of joy was with strangers. And so now I'm very, very much able to still connect with people I already know and have developed relationships with. But I didn't necessarily recognize that about myself, how much of my day was driven by interactions with strangers. And that was because, I didn't have a car for a couple years, so took a lot of public transportation and ride share. And so realized that was part of the rhythm of my day. So I think that's piece, and I'll talk about it later because there's still certain ways that we can interact with strangers even in this moment. But I think that that's the disorienting part when you recognize how much of the things that you didn't realize were rhythms actually were, and then how much even running into colleagues that you sometimes really enjoy spending time with and sometimes you don't, but either way it's part of your daily fabric, and it's hard when it gets taken away.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Nate, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think actually similar to Rachel, I found that I am a person, I don't like routine. So I've found a career and built my life in a way where I don't want this. I want every day to be different and unique in terms of the work I do, the people I interact with, and that brings me joy. And that, I want new challenges. I don't want that routine life. And so to be sheltered in place and be locked into the same routine every day, it kind of drives me nuts. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I build, getting out on a bike ride, how do I find these ways to still give me life and give me energy and throw diversity into my day? So I've been exploring what that looks like for myself. But.
Yeah, and an element of, at least for me, an element of wonder and surprise. I found myself certainly towards the beginning of Shelter in Place being pretty envious of folks that were already had a routine and were more, I viewed as more disciplined because I felt like they adapted quicker. And then had to come to terms with the fact that that's sort of how I've built my life, with a lot of variety and pursuit of wonder and surprise. And so how do I find that when my orbit is more limited?
Yeah.
I love listening to this because and both of you, I think, touched on like what brings you joy, which we didn't really ask that part of it, but I love that that's the search while we're in this, right? Is like, where do I still find my joy? And I laugh because I am a routine person. I'm like, you got to have your routines because then you know where to like get creative, right? So I love that what brings me joy is almost the opposite of what brings you joy. I love that about people is, right, we're diverse by nature. But I found I love that one of the things that's helped me not be overwhelmed day by day is like the routine of making my bed. We talked about this, I think, on another episode. I'm like, we need the routine. Like the kids, you get up and make your bed. At the very least, it's one thing you've done to keep some normalcy and you've like checked it off your list. So in any case, I thought it was funny that, you know, as humans, we all experience things so differently. And I love that you use the terminology, both of you, like what brings you joy. And I'm like laughing because I'm like, oh, well, it's the opposite for me.
Yeah. They both also talked about the spontaneity of your day, and you don't even think about how much spontaneity is created by just moving from place to place. Rachel, you talked about the coworkers that you may or may not want to interact with. Like, how often do we go out and see someone that we weren't expecting to see? And that's just like a little bright spot of our day, or just something serendipitous happens. I know that serendipity can happen at home, but it seems much less magical when you're at home than when these things are happening out in the world that are giving you energy and that are creating different opportunities to interact and cultivate relationships and cultivate the joy that drives us every day. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was thinking about it this morning because I think what I most loved about the serendipitous human interactions, particularly people I didn't already know, was when there's a piece that connects with the human experience. And since I'm not having at-length conversations with anybody I don't already know, that piece I actually realized a couple days ago that I was replacing it with reading more poetry. And so I was like, that's interesting that was almost a swap where there was just some kind of connection to the human experience and particularly deep honesty that in a way could be replaced with that. So it wasn't necessarily that social box needed to be checked with more time spent with other people, but that I needed to check that in a different way. And so I think that's something that we talk about a lot in sort of customer oriented business is like, what job does this thing do? And the job that thing was doing for me, or that activity was doing for me, was connecting with the human experience. So I actually didn't need to do a direct swap with more social interaction. I needed the job to get done in a different way.
I like that. I'm just thinking, I'm like kind of thinking about the last time I even read poetry, which is awesome. So it's a great idea. Thanks, Rachel, for that idea in general. Okay, so I want to know from the two of you, like we said, you guys are both out in the community, building community, working with people all the time, and that's obviously had to adapt. So pre-pandemic and now, would you consider yourself introverts, extroverts, or even what we call omniverts, which I had to look up? But that means kind of a little bit of both. Have you seen like any changes in yourself? Like maybe you were something more before, or maybe you've become something now, or can you speak to that at all in your lives personally?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, you know, I'm definitely an omnivore and omnivert. But yeah, I found that, you know, I love that social interaction. Like I like getting up and going into work every day. I like that social interaction that happens in an office type setting. That fills me up. Unlike most people, I love meetings. I love sitting in a well-run meeting. You can get so much done. You divide and conquer, and it's like a good meeting is awesome. And it's harder to do that, you know, from your home and on Zoom. So I love that social interaction. That fills me up. That was a big part of my life pre-pandemic. But then I also love that alone time. And that's something I think I've discovered more recently in my life in the last few years with kids, and realizing, oh man, I need to get away from this to stay healthy and to stay in the right mindset. So, you know, exercise has been cycling and getting away and having that few hours to myself has been good for me, my family, my work, everything. And so that piece I've been able to maintain, and that's probably been the best grounding and health in my life right now, is continuing to exercise, and that personal outlet is kind of keeping me sane right now. So yeah, so I think I'm on both sides of that. I need all that right now. So
That's helpful. I identify as an extrovert. I think that my sister always says of me, I always joke that if I run for office, my sister will have the best smear campaign ever, because she's got all these things up her sleeve about the funny things about my personality. But I'm getting married soon, and it's one of the hardest things, and it's all up in the air if I'll be able to gather this many people. But one of the hardest things was the guest list, because my sister always jokes that I have the most random friends, and it's true. And I don't rank them. Like, I don't have a natural sort of like how to prioritize who's closest to me. They all feel evenly close.
I love them all.
Yeah, so that's a challenge whenever I have to do anything that sort of like requires like focusing in. So I think that that's something that's been really interesting during this pandemic, because it's hard for me to sometimes even realize like, who are the people I should kind of like be on a regular like call, check in, because I have like hundreds of friends that I actually feel very close to, all of them almost evenly. So that's been a really interesting, in addition to extrovert versus introvert versus omnivert, also like who feels close and that kind of thing. So I've taken some actions to just kind of call through folks almost systematically to check in and to be checked in on. And I think that one of the, I feel busier than usual actually with work related things. But I think that I've reevaluated the cost that I usually associated with time. And the thing in my brain that used to tell me I don't have time for XYZ is a little bit more relaxed, particularly when it's like reaching out to folks. And so, that's been an interesting thing to both learn about myself and figuring out what that looks like to continue to connect with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. I heard that phrase, like, people are saying, oh, you're working from home. Well, we're not actually working from home. We're at home working during a pandemic. And so having things like relaxing what things used to mean in our mind, so that we can make space for both being in the pandemic and working. And Nate, you mentioned, a family and, kids maybe running in, Kyle, the same, like it's just a different flow and different environment. And so how does that affect how we're shifting those social interactions? I think that's something that we're all learning about ourselves and reflecting on and getting to think and talk about as well. So I would love to hear you two we've started to get to this a little bit, but talk a little bit about how you are connecting with the important people in your life and what that looks like for you. And then also any like unique or interesting ways that you've heard of other people finding ways to make connections when we're sheltering at home in this pandemic.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in. I think for me, it's been interesting, even though I'm surrounded by wife and kids and there's this built-in community. I found myself isolating more and more, and kind of pulling away from that to create that space because I need it. And so that was kind of interesting. But then I also found that I was doing that letting my relationships lapse outside of that. So my family members, my close friends, because relationships, we know they're hard. They take work, they're messy. And so the fact that I don't have to worry about them, it's nice. I'm just gonna be lazy. I'm not going to text or call and then I think a few weeks into this thing, I'm like, oh man, I'm isolating. I saw that, I identified that. And so for me, I've had to I think there's two things I've kind of put in place to maintain that social connectedness. And the first is to schedule that community, so to put it on the calendar. So I've got a weekly happy hour with my college friends, and we sit down, it's at dinner time and we're having a drink and the family, it's crazy, but it's like every Thursday. Like that's what we're doing. It's on the calendar. Hit the Zoom button, and we're connected across the country. Another one is with my church, a Wednesday night with adults. We put the kids down. It's in the evening, like 8:30 p.m., and we hang out and we talk about the craziness of how to be a parent and work in this new reality. And then another one that I haven't scheduled yet that I need to is a date night with my wife weekly, and getting that on the calendar and finding creative ways to still do that. So scheduling community has been one piece for me. And the other is forcing face-to-face communication. So avoid, I'm trying to say I'm going to do less emails, less texting, less phone calls, and I'm going to do more Google Hangouts, FaceTime, and Zoom calls. And so there's just something that happens when you're face to face where you can see people, you can read nonverbal communication, and that's where empathy and vulnerability and real human connection happens when you're looking at people. And so that's another thing I've tried to build into my life. So those are the two pieces for me.
That's great. How about you, Rachel?
So I think because I'm not good at routine, it keeps shifting. So there were quite a few weeks where I just, I think others in my family adapted quite well to what Nate was sharing in terms of like virtual happy hours. And I was sort of just didn't want any more screen time in my evenings. And so I definitely started picking up the phone a lot more and not having video on. So almost opposite in some ways, where just being not to have to look at a screen, but still being able to connect with people. And I think that the piece there that was different is I almost always, used to text folks for a good time to call, and I started just calling. And, that was something that was a big part of my life before we got so used to text messages. So that was fun to return to just calling. And then I think that, I've just been really, maybe in the similar way that the poetry has sort of been speaking to my soul, the creativity that other folks have. And I feel like I have this like little alarm that's going off in my head when I see what others are doing to connect each other, that has that creativity piece. So I have some colleagues in New York that they just created a virtual platform to help nonprofits create like a quick landing page for those that wanted to share their stimulus check with them. And they did it, over a couple hours. And then I have a friend here locally who said, a lot of folks have fruit trees in their backyard. Could you, using all safety protocols, come and we'll do a mutual aid thing where we'll come and swap fruit from our backyard. So those are just things. And I think one of the things that was causing me a lot of, causing me to not take risks during this time and sort of being paralyzed was just this idea that things had to be perfectly designed before they got out there, and just seeing a lot of folks taking action and it not being perfect and it not being totally faked. But that it just was something that would cause people like, oh my goodness, there's a grapefruit here that, it's clean, it's sanitized, and went through all the protocol, and it's from somebody else's house. So I think that also just a piece of creative connection is to recognize the little creative projects that folks have that aren't perfect, but are worth supporting. And then I've spent a lot of my time trying to figure out how I can support those. And that's made me feel a lot more connected as well. It feels action oriented.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Kyle, have you seen other people doing interesting creative things to stay connected, or are you and your family using any like special techniques?
No, that's a great question. We were on a walk yesterday, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, but I loved what took off with the teddy bears in the window. Have you guys seen that project?
No.
So what people are doing around neighborhoods, and I think it's at least countrywide at this point, is putting like stuffed animals or teddy bears. Or yesterday when we were on a walk, we saw that people had drawn like all of these hearts and this beautiful like imagery and just put it in their windows to remind people like, we're all out here, like you all matter. We can still be like creatively share kind of a connection and some love, like almost a virtual hug. So I really enjoyed that because it's given us some purpose too. When we get outside, it's like the kids want to get outside so that they can explore and discover these things. And it just makes me happy. Like there was someone else that also had signs, like a series of signs that said like, I see you, you matter, like keep going. And my daughter, who's 5, was just like, what are those things? Like, she was like, what do they mean? And like, what a great spark of conversation, right? To kind of continue telling her like, just because we're all inside doesn't mean we have to stop, like you said, Rachel, like being creative and sharing our gifts in the ways that we can. So it's been really fun to see those efforts that people have made around our community, and I know elsewhere. So I really like that way of creatively staying connected in this time. And I have to say too, I love that you guys gave 2 different answers again, like almost opposites of each other, right? Like it's just this awesome reminder that we're all going through the same thing, but reacting so differently and needing different things, right? Like Nate wanted to schedule things and Rachel was like, I don't really want to schedule things. So I love like how I'm hearing that, because it's just so true to reflect on the beauty and our uniqueness, even in these times and even in the ways that we show our own resilience, I think is so cool. Yeah, but what about you, Carrie, before we move on? I've got one more question for these guys, but what about you? Have you seen anything else like creative or that's fun?
Some of my friends, we do a Wednesday game night where we get on Jack TV and we all we're on Zoom and then we're on our phones and we're like in the room together, like playing. So that actually has been just a fun way to be on Zoom, but not like be on Zoom. I feel like I've heard people who are on the screen all day, like it gives them relief to actually be on screen where you don't have to be like completely buttoned up, like whatever, instead of like, oh, I'm in a meeting right now. So having that opportunity to decompress. I have a friend who's a photographer in Chicago, and she's been observing social distancing and taking walks and taking pictures of people from their front door or from their porch. And I thought that was like super cool. She's like, I'm not sure why this is hitting me right now, but I have all this creative energy in this pandemic and finding a way to have that outlet. Similar to Rachel, you're reading more poetry. So letting that come out in different ways. And then I had a friend, I think a lot of people are doing this for birthdays. Like we all get on Zoom to sing happy birthday. But my friend's wife actually got all of her friends to create little snippets of us singing Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody. And so she put it all together in this video, and we got to talk to her after she had seen it and was crying, and it was just a special way. And funnily, my friend's wife had already planned this video montage before the pandemic hit. So it was like the perfect gift, because that was like the only one that was still available to her for my friend's 40th birthday. So, just being where we are, taking what we can from the environment, but still finding these interesting creative ways to show our love, and also giving other people a chance to express creativity too is always an energy giver. So.
Did anybody catch, or have you guys been following at all? I'm a nerd about this. So John Krasinski from The Office, he's doing something called Some Good News.
Yes.
Have you guys seen this? So he's doing these great, just like snippets of like 10, 15 minutes of highlights of what people are doing creatively and kind and just awesome, right? Like good news that we want to hear. And I think it was last Friday, he hosted a virtual prom. And so it was like the coolest thing to see. He like got streamers and glasses, and he got like, what is his name? Chance the Rapper? I'm so old. Chance? Yeah?
I think that's a wrap. We're like,
yeah, it was just a really cool outlet. He had the Jonas Brothers and some other people that, again, I'm older, Billie Eilish. I didn't know who she was, but it was really cool. And he had snippets of the kids around the country still dressing up, like a mom who still gave her daughter like the prom queen sash and crown. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. Like to see people, I think it's our divine nature just crying out in creativity amidst what could otherwise be like chaos and a crisis. It's like, oh yes, I love that reflection. So you got to look it up if you haven't seen John Krasinski's Some Good News. It's awesome. Okay, so I've got another, I think our last question for you guys is, we talked about, again, how can business owners or those that are part of a church or a nonprofit, whatever it may be right now, and even us as individuals, what is some practical advice or some, maybe some things, I know we've talked about you guys, but maybe what you've seen in your communities too, if people are feeling isolated, how can they go about being connected or feeling that sense of connection this time?
I mean, I think a lot of, for small businesses, I think there's not really any sort of service organization that serves small businesses, whether it's like Connect All or whether it's Business for Good or whether it's a small business development center network that I work for or any of the business improvement districts. There's not a single one that hasn't sort of opened up their doors a little bit more than usual in terms of like who's able to come in for services. And there's not a one that doesn't have something that is to either resource documents or highlighting small businesses and their current offerings, or like pivot classes. So we're starting one next week where we're going to be doing a couple different workshops on low touch economy, as well as connecting with your customers what you should always do, but in this particular way where needs have shifted and what's valuable to people is shifting, that being more important. So I think that in terms of not feeling alone, I think most of the time it's not having all the answers, but it's having a good next step. And so I think that that's one thing that's both like a mindset reframe, like what's a good next step. And then yeah, realizing that that there's a lot of organizations out there that are like a little bit more open than usual, and have folks that are like pretty good resource directors. So to say, okay, maybe it's not with us, but it's over here that you can get this particular class. And then almost everything is kind of, knowledge is being even more opened up. So I think that those are certain areas. And then picking up the phone and connecting with other business owners. I think that there's a fear that I think it's pretty unique of having to lay off employees or feeling like you're going to have to, that it's pretty hard to understand that unless you've gone through that. So finding people that really are in that same boat and going through the emotions of guilt and shame and fear and sometimes survivor's guilt that might go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a perspective I've been trying to wrap my head around is it's just that it's a perspective or a mind shift that we need to have. And it comes from that book from Jim Collins, Good to Great. Probably a lot of people have read it, but it's that example he gives from the Stockdale paradox, where there was this POW, the survivor of Vietnam. He was, in this camp for 8 years being tortured. And so the question was posed to him, like, who didn't survive? Like, who didn't make it out of there? And he said the optimist was the one who, died the quickest, and which is kind of shocking. And what he said is they were thinking that the end was near, like, hey, by Christmas, we're going to be out of here in the next 3 months. We're out here in the next 6 months. And so they just lost meaning and hope in that crazy time. And so he kind of said the people who made it was someone like himself who accepted that new reality and said, this is the way it is. I have faith. I have hope that we're going to get out. But right now I just have to accept this is my new reality. And then what he did is he built new meaning for himself within that. So he started creating within that and creating meaning for himself. So one of the things he did is he built like a communication system amongst other prisoners so they could communicate with one another. He started writing letters to his wife, and he developed a system of how to endure torture. Like, he created this whole system on how you can actually endure that. So he's doing all these things. And so I think for, us as business leaders or wherever you find yourself, it's realizing we can't just stick our head in the sand and think someday this is going to pass and it's all going to go back to normal, like the way it used to be. It's like, no, I have to dig in right now and get creative and adapt and build new systems, new habits, new routines. This new reality is kind of forcing our hand. And so, yeah, there's hope that we're not going to be, in this exact situation where we can't ever leave our homes and go into public anymore. But hey, a lot of things are going to shift. So what can I do now to plan for that? So.
And I think it's good advice. And I think that one thing that was part of my story was feeling like it was too late. Like, I adapted too quickly. Like, I should have, by March 20th, I should have already had accepted the reality in San Diego. And so I think that that's something that I keep reminding myself. It's not too late. I sometimes see people that have maybe adapted quicker and feel like, well, like all those weeks I didn't, but it's not too late. And it is a huge part of a mindset shift to practice the acceptance of the reality, and to not burn out your energy too quickly, wishing for something, burn it out early in the day, wishing that something was different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a lesson that can be applied to so many things. Just accepting where you are right now and not pushing against that. And we all have good days and bad days, and days where we want to lament, and days where we're like, okay, what can I do? And so, Rachel, you talked about the cycles. I think, honoring the cycles that we're going through, but also to your points, Nate, just knowing that this is our new reality and that normal will never be normal again. And so what we create together going forward will be new. And how can we all be a part of what that is that we're creating, and how can we add our unique strengths and our unique gifts to that in either helping others through this time or building what's coming next. So, we're all in this. We're all in this together.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what we build together. There's a lot of things, this is going a lot around a lot on social media that there's a lot of reasons that we shouldn't want to go back to normal. There's a lot of things that were super, super broken, are super, super broken about our society and how we interact. So I'm looking forward to what we collectively build. I'm hopeful, and I'm thinking that it is the critical time, but that there's also still time for us to get on track for the things that matter for our community and how we want to be as society. I don't think it's too late yet.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I agree. I continue to say, and I think I've said it on almost every episode that we've recorded, Carrie, is that this time is pregnant with possibility, right? Like there is any possibility that you want to recognize. And I think every day, to your point, Rachel, it's a new day. Like none of us had yesterday. So it's not too late because you have today. So get your head out of the sand, like Nate said, right? And let's just kind of celebrate where we are today, right? And something I've realized about this time too is that celebration and joy can live within the fear. Like they can live at the same time within me. We are multidimensional as humans. And I think people think you're either in one or the other, but it's like, no, you can be afraid yet filled with joy. So if you can embody that, and I've heard this from both of you, just kind of continue to shift your mindset to go, okay, what's the new possibility? I love all of your advice. I cannot thank you guys enough. This has been a great conversation. Does anybody have any, I guess before I rush us off, does anybody have any closing remarks or anything else that they're just dying to get out?
I think just that one of the things that we love so much about other people is those little nuggets of wisdom. So tune your ear to the wisdom and the invitations to celebration that are all around you, particularly the smaller things. I think to your point, Kyle, my mom was reading something to me the other day saying, until further notice, celebrate everything. And I think that's a really good, reminder, mantra, something like that in the morning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just say, to be hopeful, it's like not those optimists like, this is going to end, it's all go back to normal. But no, there is a deep sense of hope and opportunity, like you guys are saying in this moment. And so to hold on to that and to build from there. So
who needs normal anyways, right, you guys? I've been called a lot of things, but never normal. So, and I've done all right for myself. All right, guys. Well, before we end, I'd love to give them an opportunity, Carrie, to tell where people can connect with you. We've talked about connection, and you guys have given some great nuggets of wisdom. So is there one place that people could follow your journey or follow your story?
Go for it.
Yeah, so for me, LinkedIn is great. It's Rachel Christensen. I think the / is Christensen Rachel. And then I've got a little project about living on both sides of the border that's called Living in Between. And I also documented on my social media, which is called Transfronterista, TRAN Fronterista. And so those are two ways that I would love to keep connecting.
Yeah, and I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, but predominantly through Alabaster Jar Project. There's a website there, and Unite NCI website, and just supporting those nonprofit organizations. Yeah. So.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you two again so much for these insights on how to stay socially connected during a pandemic. I definitely enjoyed the conversation, and we'll be able to provide these tips and these insights to people who are watching. We're also going to do a one-sheeter that will go along so people can kind of have that as a resource that they can take as they're thinking about how to stay connected as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
You guys. Appreciate it.
Guys.
See you later.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching our Drive to Thrive webinar series. We are going to be continuing to provide this free content to support both business owners in their business success as well as success in their lives as we are all navigating this pandemic together.
Yep, and thanks again to our great guests. If you have suggestions on either other guests you would like to hear from or topics you'd like to hear us cover, then send us an email. We'll put up our contact information here so that you can get in touch with us. we are looking forward to continuing to just bring you ways to navigate this together. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next time.